Chapter 1. Introduction. Myth and Reality of Piracy. When we hear the word pirates today, images immediately appear in our mind's eye. Men with eye patches and wooden legs, waving skull flags, cannon thunder over the Caribbean, hidden treasures on desert islands, and smoky harbor pubs full of rum and singing. But as romantic as this image may seem, it is only part of the truth. The story of the pirates is a story full of violence, adventure, dreams of freedom, and cruelty. It ranges from the first buccaneers of Antiquity to the Vikings and barbarians to the famous buccaneers of the Caribbean. Pirates were at the same time rebels against existing power orders and tools of kings, whom they used as buccaneers. They lived in poverty and danger, but also in a world that sometimes had surprisingly democratic structures. To understand the fascination of piracy, you have to separate its reality from the myths and look at both at the same time. Because it is precisely the myth that makes pirates symbols of freedom, adventure, and resistance to this day. What is piracy? Piracy is as old as seafaring itself. As soon as people began to trade in boats, others were found to raid these ships. At its core, piracy is piracy, the violent boarding and plundering of ships or coastal settlements. There are different forms. Classic pirates, independent robbers who acted without backing. Corsairs or buccaneers, pirates with official permission who acted on behalf of a crown or city. Barbary pirates, North African pirates who operated on behalf of rulers and at the same time engaged in the slave trade. This makes it clear that piracy was never just crime, but often closely linked to politics, the economy, and war. Myth of freedom. One reason why pirates still fascinate today is because of their lifestyle. Pirates were considered outcasts who consciously opposed the constraints of society. Many of them were former sailors who had served in inhumane conditions on warships or merchant ships. In piracy, they found a form of self-determination. A democratic system often prevailed on pirate ships. The captain was elected and could also be dismissed. Loot was divided according to fixed rules. Decisions were made in council meetings. For many historians, pirates are therefore early models of an egalitarian society, even if their everyday lives were marked by violence and lawlessness. Violence and cruelty. As much as pirates stand for adventure and freedom, their reality was cruel. Raids on ships often ended in blood. Prisoners were tortured. Cities burned down. Pirates like Blackbeard, Edward Teach, spread terror by intimidating their opponents, for example, by lighting fuses in their beards to create a hellish image. Others, such as the Barbaresques, lived from the slave trade and deported thousands of people to North Africa. Most pirates led short lives. Captured pirates were usually hanged, and their corpses were exhibited in cages at the harbor as a deterrent. Pirates and power politics. Piracy has never just a criminal fringe phenomenon. Pirates were repeatedly promoted by kings, governors, or merchants. In the 16th and 17th centuries, England, France, and the Netherlands used privateers to attack the Spanish silver fleets. Corsairs received letters of capture from governments that allowed them to legally plunder enemy ships. The boundary between pirate and soldier was often blurred. Pirates outlawed today could be honored captains tomorrow, and vice versa. The birth of the myth. Why are pirates so popular despite their brutality? As early as the 18th century, stories about them were embellished. Books such as A General History of the Pirates, 1724, disseminated colorful depictions of Blackbeard or Calico Jack. In the 19th century, novels such as Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson finally made pirates heroes of pop culture. Hollywood did the rest. Films like Captain Blood, 1935, Pirates of the Caribbean, 2003 FF, or series like Black Sails gave piracy a romantic aura. Today, the pirate myth is an integral part of our culture, from children's birthday parties with eye patches to Talk Like a Pirate Day. Why pirates fascinate? There are many reasons for the fascination of pirates. They stand for freedom and breaking rules. They embody adventure in the unknown of the world's oceans. They are rebels against oppression and harsh living conditions. They are heroes and villains at the same time, a mixture of fascination and horror. It is precisely this ambiguity that makes it so interesting. Pirates were cruel robbers, but also people who were looking for a different life. In order to understand the history of pirates in all its breadth, we now have to delve deeper into antiquity, the Middle Ages, and the time of the great discoveries. Because piracy is not a phenomenon of the Caribbean alone, but as old as seafaring itself. In the next chapter, we will therefore start with the pirates of antiquity, who made the Mediterranean unsafe 2,000 years ago, from the Phoenicians to the famous pirates who even taught Rome to fear. Chapter 2. Pirates of Antiquity, from the Phoenicians to Rome. Piracy is not an invention of modern times. Long before caravels sailed to America or buccaneers attacked Spanish silver fleets, the seas were unsafe. Antiquity knows numerous examples of pirates plundering coasts, hijacking merchant ships, and threatening entire empires. In the Mediterranean, the Mare Nostrum of the Romans, battles raged for centuries between traders, states, and pirates. First traces of piracy. Even among the early seafarers of antiquity, we find evidence of piracy. Wherever merchant ships were underway, robbers soon followed, attacking these ships. The Phoenicians, who ruled the eastern Mediterranean as early as the 2nd millennium BC, were themselves considered skillful traders, and not infrequently pirates. Their fast ships made lightning-like raids possible. The Greeks were also aware of the problem. Homer mentions pirates several times in the Odyssey who pillaged coastal towns. Pirates in the Greek world. In ancient Greece, piracy was almost a normal part of life. Many city-states operated them themselves to gain wealth or weaken enemies. Crete was notorious as the home of pirates. From there, pirates raided the Aegean Sea. Even on small islands such as the Cyclades, pirate nests were created, which could hardly be controlled. Pirates attacked not only ships, but also coastal settlements, abducted people into slavery, and traded their booty. For Greece, piracy was not only a danger, but also an economic reality. Pirates and the slave trade. A particularly lucrative business was the abduction of human beings. Pirates abducted men, women, and children and sold them on slave markets. The demand was huge. Greece, later Rome, needed millions of slaves for agriculture, mining, and households. Piracy and slavery were closely linked and made pirates a central factor in the ancient economy. The Aegean Sea and Asia Minor. In the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, pirate raids in the eastern Mediterranean increased sharply. Especially in Cilicia, on the southern coast of Asia Minor, today Turkey, veritable pirate states emerged. These pirates were well organized, had strong ships, and safe bases in inaccessible bays. From there, they controlled sea routes and demanded protection money. Soon, they threatened not only traders, but also the supply of large cities. Rome and the plague of pirates. With the rise of Rome in the 2nd century BC, the problem became even greater. Rome was dependent on the import of grain from Sicily, North Africa, and Egypt. Pirate raids endangered this supply and brought the city to the brink of famine several times. Pirates even attacked ships with Roman officials. Entire cities in Italy lived in fear of robberies. The Senate was powerless because pirates were agile, unpredictable, and knew the sea better than Roman soldiers. The situation escalated so much that Rome had to resort to extraordinary measures. Pompey versus the pirates. In 67 BC, the Roman general Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, received extraordinary powers. He was given 500 ships, 120,000 soldiers, and was allowed to take action against pirates throughout the Mediterranean. His strategy was bold and effective. He divided the Mediterranean into several zones and secured each one individually. He systematically drove the pirates out of their bases. He settled many pirates in colonies in order to pacify them permanently. After only 3 months, the Mediterranean was considered cleansed. Pompey was celebrated in Rome as a savior. Significance for Rome. The suppression of the pirates had enormous consequences. Rome was able to secure its grain supply. The Mediterranean became the Roman inland road, the Mare Nostrum. Trade and communication flourished as the constant threat disappeared. Piracy did not disappear completely, but its organized form was initially broken. Ancient pirates in memory. The pirates of antiquity were transfigured in stories early on. They were considered fearless opponents, but also a barbaric threat to civilization. Especially the episode that the young Julius Caesar himself was captured by pirates became legendary. They thought he was an ordinary victim, but he promised to have them crucified later. After his release, Caesar actually organized a fleet, captured the pirates, and had them executed. This story shows both the audacity of the pirates and the Roman harshness in dealing with them. The pirates of antiquity were more than just robbers. They influenced trade, war, and politics. They forced great powers such as Rome to develop their naval power. At the same time, they laid the foundation for many myths that would be repeated later in the history of piracy, from violence to the slave trade to legends about daredevil captains. In the next chapter, we turn to the Middle Ages. New pirates appear there: the Vikings in the north, the Saracens in the Mediterranean, and others who terrified the coasts of Europe. Chapter 3. Pirates in the Middle Ages: Vikings, Saracens, and corsairs. With the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD, piracy also changed. Rome's control of the Mediterranean was over. Sea routes became more unsafe again, and coastal regions more vulnerable. In northern Europe, the Vikings appeared on the scene, while in the Mediterranean region, Saracens and later the corsairs took over the legacy of the ancient pirates. The Middle Ages were a time of permanent uncertainty at sea, an era in which pirates and robbers shaped not only trade but entire cultures. The Vikings, terror of the North. No pirate figure of the Middle Ages is as well known as the Vikings. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, they raided the coasts of Europe. Origin and motivation. The Vikings came from Scandinavia, Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. Population pressure, political fragmentation, and the allure of wealth led to many men setting sail. Ships and tactics. Their longships were fast, flat, and could be used on the open sea as well as on rivers. This allowed the Vikings to penetrate surprisingly deep into the interior of the country, for example, as far as Paris or Seville. They attacked monasteries, villages, and towns, plundered treasures, and abducted people as slaves. Effect: the Vikings spread terror throughout Europe. Church chronicles report of dragon boats on the horizon as omens of blood and fire. But the Vikings were not only robbers. They also became traders, colonizers, and later rulers in many parts of Europe. Saracens, pirates in the Mediterranean. In the Mediterranean, it was the Saracens, Muslim pirates from North Africa and Spain, who spread fear between the 7th and 11th centuries. They used fast ships to raid coastal towns in Italy, southern France, and even as far as Sicily. They often abducted Christians as slaves into the Muslim world. Their attacks on monasteries and pilgrims were particularly feared. The Saracens were not mere criminals. Their raids were often in the context of the conflicts between the Christian and Islamic world, for example, during the Crusades. Medieval corsairs and towns. Christian powers also resorted to piracy. In the High Middle Ages, coastal cities such as Genoa and Venice used pirates or mercenary fleets to eliminate competitors. In the 12th and 13th centuries, Genoa and Venice waged veritable naval wars against each other, in which piracy could hardly be distinguished from official warfare. Corsairs often received official charters that allowed them to attack enemy merchant ships, a forerunner of later privateering. Thus, the boundaries between piracy and state-legitimized violence became blurred. The Hanseatic League and pirates in the north. In the North Sea and Baltic Sea region, other pirate groups appeared on the scene. The Victual Brothers were particularly notorious in the 14th century. Originally hired as mercenaries in the service of Scandinavian kings, they soon became independent pirates. From the Baltic Sea, they attacked ships of the Hanseatic League, plundered coasts, and established bases, for example, on Gotland. Its best-known leader was Klaus Störtebeker, whose name is still entwined with legends today. The Hanseatic League, a powerful trading alliance of northern German cities, had to raise huge fleets to fight the pirates. It was not until the 15th century that the Victual Brothers were finally defeated. Corsairs in the service of religion and state. In the late Middle Ages, a new form of piracy began to emerge, the corsairs, who operated on behalf of rulers. In Spain and Portugal, seafarers were given carte blanche to attack Muslim ships in the Mediterranean. Conversely, Muslim rulers instructed corsairs to weaken Christian fleets. This practice made piracy a tool of the holy wars between Christianity and Islam. Corsairs were thus pirates and soldiers at the same time. Their raids had not only economic but also religious dimensions. Everyday life and horror in the Middle Ages. For the people on the coasts of Europe, piracy was a constant horror. Villages had to reckon with raids. Fishermen and traders feared the open sea. Many communities built watchtowers and refuge castles. The pirates themselves lived dangerously. Although booty lured, captured pirates were often cruelly punished by hanging, drowning, or the wheel. Nevertheless, the possibility of quick riches attracted new men to piracy again and again. From robbers to power factors. In the Middle Ages, it became clear that pirates were not just marginal figures. You could influence wars, Vikings, Saracens, corsairs. Threaten trade networks, Victual Brothers against the Hanseatic League. Gain political power, Viking kings, corsair leaders. Pirates were thus an integral part of the political and economic order of the Middle Ages, even if they were considered outlaws. The Middle Ages were an age of permanent pirate danger. Whether in the Mediterranean by Saracens, in the Atlantic by corsairs, or in the north by Vikings and Victual Brothers, pirates have had a decisive influence on the history of Europe. They linked robbery and violence with trade, religion, and politics. At the same time, they left behind legends that still have an impact today, from the dragon boats of the Vikings to the stories about Störtebeker. In the next chapter, we turn our gaze to the south, to the Barbary pirates of North Africa, who dominated the Mediterranean from the 16th to the 19th century, abducted millions of people into slavery, and even challenged great powers such as Spain, France, and England. Chapter 4. Piracy in the Islamic World, Barbaresques and the Mediterranean. While the Hanseatic League fought against pirates in northern Europe and the Vikings had long since become part of history, a very special form of piracy developed in the Mediterranean region. For centuries, it was ruled by the Barbaresques, buccaneers and corsairs from the ports of North Africa who made the Mare Nostrum a dangerous zone between the 16th and 19th centuries. These pirates were more than mere robbers. They were part of a geopolitical order, entangled in the struggle between Christianity and Islam, between the expanding European great powers and the Ottoman Empire. Their work shaped the history of the Mediterranean and left a legacy that still resonates today. Who were the Barbaresques? The term Barbaresque is derived from the Barbary coast, a collective term for today's Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. In ports such as Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, veritable pirate centers developed in the late Middle Ages and early modern times. The Barbary pirates not only acted on their own, but were often under the protection of local rulers or the Ottoman Sultan. This made them a mixture of pirates and state-legitimized corsairs. The religious dimension. An essential factor was the religious charge. After the reconquest of Spain by the Christians, Reconquista, 1492, many Muslims and Sephardim fled to North Africa. From there, the corsairs waged campaigns of revenge against the Christian powers of Europe. Their raids were not only aimed at loot, but also at the fight against infidels. This holy war at sea made the Barbaresques fanatical opponents for many contemporaries and reinforced the image of the Mediterranean as a border of religions. Tactics and loot. The Barbaresques relied on fast, agile ships such as galleys or light sailors, which made surprise raids possible. They hijacked merchant ships, plundered coastal towns, and abducted the inhabitants. Their slave hunts were particularly feared. Entire villages on the Italian, Spanish, or even Irish coasts were depopulated. Prisoners were sold at markets in Algiers or Tunis or released for ransom. It is estimated that between the 16th and 19th centuries, over 1 million Europeans fell into North African slavery. Famous corsair leaders. Some Barbary leaders achieved almost mythical status. Barbarossa, Khayr ad-Din, 1478 to 1546. An Ottoman admiral who dominated the western Mediterranean from Algiers and at times even threatened Spain. Turgut Reis, Dragut, 1485 to 1565. A feared corsair who conquered Tunis and Tripoli and was closely associated with the Ottoman Empire. Ulu Chali Reis, 1519 to 1587. An Italian who converted to Islam and worked his way up to become the powerful governor of Algiers. These men combined raids with politics and became symbolic figures of Islamic naval power. Europe's response. The European powers reacted differently to the Barbaresques. After 1492, Spain built a whole chain of fortresses on the North African coast, but was never able to completely contain the pirates. Italian cities such as Genoa and Venice fought bitterly for control of the sea routes. Order of Malta. The Knights of St. John, later Malteser, made it their mission to fight the corsairs. They attacked North African coasts themselves and developed a kind of counter-corsairism. A veritable balance of terror was created, raids and counterattacks alternated, and the Mediterranean remained an unsafe sea for centuries. Piracy as politics. For North African cities, piracy was not just a side business, but a central part of their economy. Tributes and protection money. Many European states concluded treaties with the Barbaresques, paid tributes, and thus bought security for their merchant ships. Corruption. Governors and pirate leaders enriched themselves enormously, while ordinary pirates often received only meager shares. Ottomans' influence. The sultans in Istanbul supported the corsairs as long as they promoted their interests against Spain, Venice, or the Habsburgs. Piracy thus became official policy, a tool in the great power struggle between Orient and Occident. The peak and the decline. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the power of the Barbaresques reached its peak, but from the 18th century onwards, their decline began. Strong fleets such as those of the British, French, and Dutch were increasingly able to fight the corsairs. Colonial interests. Europe began to directly control the North African coasts. American attacks. After independence, the U.S. refused to pay tributes. In the Barbary Wars, 1801 to 1815, they sent their navy to Tripoli and Algiers, the first major foreign operation of the U.S. Navy. Finally, in 1816, the British fleet bombed Algiers and forced the city to surrender many slaves. With the French conquest of Algeria in 1830, the era of the Barbaresques finally ended. Bequest. The Barbary pirates left behind an ambivalent picture. For Europe, they were a symbol of danger, the embodiment of the Muslim corsair. For North Africa, they were an expression of self-assertion against overpowering Christian states. Their raids still shape the collective memory of many coastal regions, from Ireland to Sicily. At the same time, they were an example of how piracy and politics intertwined, not isolated crime, but part of international power games. The Barbaresques made the Mediterranean a dangerous space for centuries. They combined robbery, religion, and politics in a unique way. Its rise and fall exemplifies how piracy could reflect both economic hardship and global political interests. In the next chapter, we change the setting. With the discoveries of America in the 15th and 16th centuries, piracy increasingly shifted to the New World. Spanish treasure fleets full of gold and silver soon attracted pirates, buccaneers, and adventurers who made the Atlantic and Caribbean new strongholds. Chapter 5: The Discovery of the New World and the Beginning of Caribbean Piracy. The discovery of America by Christopher Columbus in 1492 marked the beginning of a new era in world history, and at the same time a new chapter in piracy. The oceans, which had previously known trade in the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean, now became the stage for global power struggles. Spain and Portugal, based on the papal partition of the world through the Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494, laid claim to the newly discovered lands and their riches. Soon after, other powers did everything they could to profit from this wealth, and pirates played a central role in this. Spanish treasure fleets, a magnet for pirates. From the early 16th century, the Spanish crown organized the transport of gold, silver, and precious stones from the colonies of Central and South America to Europe. Vast quantities of silver flowed from Mexico, Peru, and Bolivia, especially from the mines of Potosí. The treasures were collected in Havana and Veracruz and sent across the Atlantic in large convoys. These so-called flotas de Indias were heavily guarded, but their cargoes were so immensely valuable that they inevitably aroused covetousness. The treasure fleets became the preferred target of pirates and buccaneers. Each raid could bring in a fortune. Portuguese rivals and the open Atlantic. Portugal, which was expanding eastwards towards India and the Far East, was also vulnerable. His ships transported spices, silk, and exotic goods, a floating treasure. While Spain wanted to control the Caribbean, the Portuguese secured their routes around Africa. But pirates and buccaneers lurked here too, especially on the Atlantic coasts of Africa. Buccaneers on behalf of the crowns. The rivalry between the European powers meant that piracy was soon systematically encouraged. Since Spain and Portugal seemed to be favored by the Pope, England, France, and the Netherlands looked for other ways to participate in the colonial trade. This is how the buccaneers were created, pirates with an official license. They received letters of capture from their kings that allowed them to legally raid enemy ships. This blurred the line between warfare and piracy. Buccaneers like Francis Drake or Jean Fleury became national heroes, although from the Spanish point of view, they were nothing more than criminals. First pirate bases in the Caribbean. The Caribbean islands quickly developed into strongholds of piracy. Tortuga, near Haiti, became a refuge for French buccaneers and adventurers. Port Royal in Jamaica became a notorious pirate port under English control, where gold, rum, and slaves were traded. Small islands and bays also offered safe hiding places from which pirates attacked Spanish ships. These bases soon made the Caribbean the most dangerous sea in the world. The buccaneer, hunters, and pirates. The so-called buccaneer played a special role. Originally, it was hunters who killed cattle and wild boars on the Caribbean islands and preserved their meat by buccaneering, smoking. Many of them later joined pirate groups, especially the French and English. They formed loose alliances that were connected by common raids and rules, a precursor to the famous pirate brotherhoods. The buccaneer embodied the transition from hunters to lawless buccaneers, who would soon become legend. Spain under pressure. For Spain, piracy became an enormous problem. Despite heavy armament and convoy systems, the treasure fleets suffered losses again and again. Especially the Caribbean islands, scattered and difficult to control, offered countless hiding places. Spain reacted with brutal severity. Captured pirates were executed, settlements burned down. But the size of the ocean made complete control impossible. Pirates as pioneers. Interestingly, pirates were often also pioneers of globalization. They knew the best routes, currents, and wind conditions. Some also traded in contraband, such as sugar, tobacco, or slaves. Their activities undermined the Spanish monopoly and opened up access to the New World for other nations. As paradoxical as it sounds, pirates contributed to the emergence of global trade. Legends and stories. Even in this early phase, legends about pirate raids emerged. The French buccaneers Jean Fleury became famous, who intercepted a Spanish fleet in 1523 with treasures from Hernán Cortés, including gold and precious stones of the Aztecs. English buccaneers such as Francis Drake also made headlines. His circumnavigation of the world, 1577 to 1580, was not only a voyage of discovery, but also a gigantic raid against Spanish colonies. The discovery of America was the starting signal for a new era of piracy. Gold and silver from the New World made the oceans a battlefield for pirates, buccaneers, and great powers. The Caribbean became the stage on which the famous Golden Age of piracy would soon take place. In the next chapter, we will take a closer look at these buccaneers in the service of the crowns. We see how men like Francis Drake, John Hawkins, or Henry Morgan not only robbed treasures, but also made politics and challenged entire empires. Chapter 6. Buccaneers in the Service of the Crowns. Spanish silver fleets in sight. In the 16th and 17th centuries, piracy took on a new form in the Atlantic and the Caribbean. It was professionalized, legitimized, and integrated into the great power struggles of the European empires. The lawless pirates were replaced by the buccaneers, licensed buccaneers who targeted the Spanish silver fleets on behalf of their kings and queens. The rivalry between Spain, the most powerful colonial power of the time, and the emerging maritime powers, England, France, and the Netherlands, shaped this chapter of history. Buccaneers were warriors, robbers, and diplomats at the same time, and some of them became national heroes. The pirate letter, legality for pirates. The central instrument of privateering was the letter of marque. It entitled its owner to capture enemy ships in the name of the crown. Part of the loot went to the crone, the rest to the crew. Captured ships were brought before prize courts, which examined the legality of the raid. Thus, a buccaneer could be considered a public servant at the same time and still act like a pirate. The difference was often just a piece of paper. Without a pirate letter, you were a criminal. With a pirate letter, you were a servant of the fatherland. Francis Drake, pirate and national hero. The most famous privateer in England was Francis Drake, 1540 to 1596. He made a career as a captain in the Atlantic at an early age. Together with his cousin John Hawkins, he was involved in the slave trade. In the 1570s, he began targeted raids on Spanish colonies and ships. In particular, his attack on the city of Nombre de Dios in Panama brought him great fame. From 1577 to 1580, he undertook a circumnavigation of the world, during which he captured numerous Spanish ships and brought immeasurable treasures to England. Drake was born by Queen Elizabeth I and feared by the Spaniards as El Drake, the dragon. His greatest deed was his participation in the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, which secured England's independence from Spain. John Hawkins and the slave trade. Drake's cousin John Hawkins is considered a pioneer of the English slave trade. He brought African slaves to the New World and sold them there to the Spanish colonies, a dark chapter in the history of piracy. Although he came into conflict with Spain, he was also supported by the Crown and appointed treasurer of the Royal Navy. Hawkins shows how closely privateer, trade, and state policy were intertwined. Francis and Dutch buccaneers. It was not only England that relied on buccaneers. France used corsairs, such as John Fleury, who captured a Spanish fleet with Aztec gold in 1523. In Brittany and Normandy, ports such as St. Malo were built, which served as centers for French privateers. The Netherlands, which wanted to break away from Spain, waged a veritable naval war in the 16th and 17th centuries. Their famous water gooses attacked Spanish ships and ports. Privateering was thus an integral part of European great power politics. Henry Morgan, the Corsair of Jamaica. Another legendary name is Henry Morgan, 1635 to 1688, a Welsh buccaneer who was in the service of England. From Port Royal in Jamaica, he led raids against the Spaniards. In 1668, he sacked the city of Portobello in Panama. In 1671, he led a spectacular attack on Panama City, in which he marched through the jungle with over 1,000 men and burned the city to the ground. Although his actions were brutal, Morgan was not punished. On the contrary, he was later appointed Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica and died a rich man. Morgan embodies the fine line between pirate and civil servant like no other. Spain's responses. Spain responded to the threat of buccaneers with new strategies. Silver Fleet's convoy systems have been improved. Bases such as Havana and Cartagena were massively fortified. The Spanish Navy received more resources to fight pirates. But despite all efforts, Spain was never able to completely prevent the raids. The ocean was too big, the number of attackers too high. The change from the 16th to the 17th century. In the course of the 17th century, buccaneering changed. It became more and more an instrument of state policy. England and France used privateers to weaken Spain's power. At the same time, it remained an outlet for social tensions. Unemployed sailors, adventurers, and soldiers of fortune found a livelihood here. Pirate ports such as Tortuga and Nassau grew into thriving, albeit lawless, communities. This set the stage for what historians call the Golden Age of Piracy, a time when the pirates of the Caribbean became legends such as Blackbeard, Calico Jack, or Bonny roamed the Caribbean, the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean. Chapter 7. The Golden Age of Piracy, 1650 to 1730. When we talk about pirates today, we almost always think of this era, the years between 1650 and 1730. It was the time when the Caribbean, the Atlantic, and even the Indian Ocean were populated by pirates whose names are still legends today. Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Bonny, or Bartholomew Roberts. The Golden Age was characterized by chaos, war, colonial competition, and economic opportunities. Pirates took advantage of the gaps that arose between the great powers and made the sea their habitat. Causes of the rise. Several factors led to the flourishing of piracy during this period. Colonial rivalries. England, France, Spain, and the Netherlands fought for colonies and trade routes. In the intervening periods between wars, many buccaneers lost their legitimacy and became pirates. Rich booty. Spanish silver fleets, sugar and tobacco transports, slave ships, all these were floating treasuries. Pirate bases. Islands such as Nassau in the Bahamas, Tortuga, or Port Royal offered safe havens for repairs, supplies, and trade in booty. Social hardship. Many seafarers lived in miserable conditions in the Navy or on merchant ships. Pirates promised freedom, booty, and co-determination. Organization and life on board. Pirates in the Golden Age were very different from ordinary sailors. Democracy. Captains were elected and could be dismissed. Decisions were often made by majority vote. Distribution of loot. There were fixed rules. One part went to the captain, a larger part was distributed fairly among the crew. Injured received compensation. Rules and articles. Many crews adhered to so-called pirate articles, written agreements that set out rights and obligations. These structures gave the pirates a degree of self-determination that had a revolutionary effect in the society of the time. Black flags and symbols. The most famous symbol of piracy, the Jolly Roger, the skull flag, dates back to this era. Various captains developed their own versions, often with skulls, bones, swords, or hourglasses. The flag was a psychological instrument. It was supposed to spread terror and persuade opponents to surrender without a fight. Pirates relied on intimidation. The faster a ship surrendered, the less blood had to be shed. Blackbeard, the horror of the Caribbean. Probably the most famous pirate was Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. He commanded the mighty ship Queen Anne's Revenge. To spread fear, he braided fuses into his beard, which smoked burning in battle. Blackbeard temporarily controlled the entire Carolina coast and blocked ports. In 1718, he was killed in a dramatic battle by British Marines. His severed head was exhibited on the bowsprit. Calico Jack and the pirates Bonny and Mary Read. John Rackham, known as Calico Jack, was known less for his victories than for his crew. He sailed with two notorious pirates, Bonny and Mary Read. Both women initially disguised themselves as men, but soon fought openly on deck. They contradicted the role model of the time and are still symbolic figures of female piracy today. After their capture, both escaped execution because they were pregnant. Their further fate remains in the dark. Bartholomew Roberts, the most successful pirate. While Blackbeard was notorious, Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, was the most successful pirate of the Golden Age. Between 1719 and 1722, he captured over 400 ships, more than any other pirate. He introduced strict rules on board, banned gambling and drunkenness on duty. In 1722, he fell in battle against the Royal Navy, but his career shows how professional some pirate organizations were. Piracy in the Indian Ocean. Not only the Caribbean was affected, the Indian Ocean also became a pirate stronghold. Pirates such as Henry Every or Thomas Tew attacked rich merchant ships of the East India Company and Muslim pilgrimage ships. Every's attack on the ship Ganji Sawai of the Mughal fleet in 1695 in particular brought him immeasurable treasures and the wrath of India and Europe. This made piracy a global phenomenon. Decline of the Golden Age. From the 1720s onwards, the great powers began to take systematic action against pirates. The Royal Navy stationed more ships in the Caribbean. Pirate ports such as Nassau were conquered and cleansed. Hundreds of pirates were captured and publicly executed. Their bodies often hung up as a deterrent. Piracy did not disappear completely, but the Golden Age ended. The Golden Age of piracy is still the most formative epoch of our image of pirates. The stories of Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Bonny or Roberts combined violence, freedom, adventure, and myth. It was a time when pirates became symbols of rebellion and at the same time merciless robbers. In the next chapter, we'll take a closer look at the Caribbean as a pirate stronghold. Nassau, Tortuga, and Port Royal, the legendary pirate ports that went down in history as the Republics of the Outlaws. Chapter 8. The Caribbean as a Pirate Stronghold, Nassau, Tortuga, and Port Royal. If there are places that sound like synonyms for piracy, it's the ports and islands of the Caribbean. Nassau, Tortuga, and Port Royal became centers of lawlessness in the 17th and early 18th centuries, where pirates traded, equipped ships, and squandered booty. They were more than just places of refuge. They were experimental fields for alternative societies, half anarchic, half democratic, and thus a central part of the golden age of piracy. Tortuga, the island of the buccaneers. The small island of Tortuga, north of Hispaniola, now Haiti, was a gathering place for adventurers, deserters, and soldiers of fortune from the 1620s onwards. Originally, the island was used by French settlers, but soon the buccaneers settled here, hunters who hunted cattle and wild boars and preserved the meat by boucanier. These men formed pirate gangs that attacked Spanish ships and settlements. Tortuga became the base of the French buccaneers, who acted against Spain with the tacit approval of their government. The island had hardly any orderly administration. Instead, the law of the strongest ruled, mixed with the pirate articles that guaranteed internal order. Port Royal, the most sinful city in the world. Port Royal in Jamaica was even more famous. After the English conquered Jamaica from the Spanish in 1655, Port Royal became the most important base for English privateers. Pirates like Henry Morgan used the city to sell their booty and equip new ships. Soon, Port Royal was notorious for its taverns, brothels, and gambling houses. Contemporaries called it the most sinful city in the world. In 1671, Morgan returned to Port Royal as a hero after his invasion of Panama. But the city's golden age was short. In 1692, it was partially destroyed by a severe earthquake and tsunami. Many saw this as a divine punishment. Nassau, the Pirate Republic. Nassau probably achieved its most legendary status in the Bahamas. At the beginning of the 18th century, Nassau was a largely uncontrolled port. Hundreds of pirates gathered here, including famous names such as Blackbeard, Charles Vane, and Calico Jack. Nassau became the so-called Pirate Republic, a kind of anarchic brotherhood in which captains were elected and people lived according to their own rules. The English governor, Woodes Rogers, tried to bring Nassau under control from 1718 onwards. With the motto, "Piracy expelled, commerce restored," he successfully fought the pirates. The end of the Pirate Republic was sealed. Life in the pirate strongholds. These ports were more than just bases. They were centers of their own subculture. Multicultural. Among the pirates were English, French, Dutch, Africans, and indigenous Caribs. Slaves often joined the pirates to gain freedom. Intoxication and waste. Loot was often immediately squandered on rum, women, and gambling. Wealth was fleeting. Self-government. Democratic principles applied within the pirate crews. In the ports, too, there was often a rough but communal atmosphere. Contemporaries described Nassau or Port Royal as places of freedom without law, fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Pirates and colonial powers. The pirate strongholds did not exist in a vacuum. They were closely linked to the interests of the colonial powers. Spain saw them as a constant threat. England and France tolerated them as long as they harmed their own enemies. Merchants profited from smuggling with the pirates. It was only when piracy got out of hand and threatened regular trade that the colonial powers began to take serious action against the ports. Fall of the pirate cities. Tortuga lost its importance in the late 17th century when France took control of the island and drove out the pirates. Port Royal never became what it used to be after the earthquake of 1692. Kingston took over its role as the main port of Jamaica. Nassau was cleansed by Governor Rogers in 1718. Many pirates accepted his offer of amnesty, others were captured and executed. With this, the great pirate cities disappeared, but their myth remained alive. Tortuga, Port Royal, and Nassau were more than simple ports. They were symbols of a brief period in which pirates created their own societies. They offered freedom that hardly existed in the strictly hierarchical world of the time. At the same time, they were places of violence, excess, and lawlessness. Their splendor lasted only a few decades, but they still shape the image of pirate paradises today. In the next chapter, we'll take a look at the most famous pirates of the Golden Age: Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Bonny, Mary Read, and others whose stories continue to inspire pop culture today. Chapter 9. Famous Pirates: Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Bonny, and Mary Read. The Golden Age of piracy produced a whole series of captains who went down in legend through their deeds, brutality, or excesses. Some were feared strategists, others colorful characters whose lives still provide material for stories today. 4 names in particular stand out: Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Bonny, and Mary Read. Their stories show the diversity of piracy, from the terror of a merciless commander to the rebellion of two women against social constraints. Blackbeard, the terror of the Atlantic. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, is still the epitome of the pirate today. Originally, he was probably a simple sailor from Bristol who joined pirates around 1716. Its flagship was the Queen Anne's Revenge, a powerful warship with 40 guns. Blackbeard was notorious less for bloody battles than for his fear tactics. He braided burning fuses into his beard so that smoke and sparks surrounded his face, an image that often caused opponents to surrender without resistance. Blackbeard controlled entire stretches of coastline in the American colonies. In 1718, he blockaded Charleston Harbor, took hostages, and extorted ransom. But his career ended in the same year. In a dramatic naval battle off North Carolina, he was captured by British Marines. Blackbeard is said to have continued to fight despite several gunshot wounds and blows before he died. His severed head was attached to his opponent's bowsprit as a deterrent symbol. Calico Jack, the colorful buccaneer. John Rackham, known as Calico Jack, was not a great general, but he left behind an enduring symbol, the famous skull with crossed swords, which is still considered the pirate flag today. He got his nickname because he liked to wear clothes made of brightly patterned calico fabric. Rackham was originally helmsman under the pirate Charles Vane, but prevailed against him and took command. His greatest successes were the capture of smaller merchant ships in the Caribbean. Calico Jack might have been forgotten long ago if it weren't for two extraordinary women who were part of his crew, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Anne Bonny, the rebel. Anne Bonny was born around 1700 as the daughter of an Irish lawyer and a servant. Her family emigrated to South Carolina, where they led a rather respectable life, but Anne longed for adventure. She married sailor James Bonny, but soon separated from him and joined Calico Jack in Nassau. As a pirate, she wore men's clothes, fought side by side with the crew, and earned a reputation for being fearless and cruel. Contemporary witnesses report that she cursed louder in battle and struck harder than some men. Her relationship with Rackham was passionate, but also scandalous. Today, Anne Bonny is considered a symbol of women who rebelled against the narrow gender roles of her time. Mary Read, the hidden one. Even more mysterious is the story of Mary Read. As a child, she was disguised as a boy by her mother to secure an inheritance. Growing up like this, she served as a soldier and later as a sailor, unrecognized for a long time. Eventually, she also joined Calico Jack, where she met Anne Bonny. Mary Read was a skilled fighter. Reports tell that she was particularly brave in battles and surpassed even hardened men. The end of Rackham, Bonny, and Read. In 1718, the crew of Calico Jack was recruited by the Royal Navy. While most of the pirates were drunk and incompetent, only Anne Bonny and Mary Read are said to have fought on deck. All three were sentenced to death in Jamaica. Rackham was hanged, his body publicly displayed as a deterrent. Anne Bonny and Mary Read escaped execution because they were both pregnant. Mary Read died a short time later in prison, probably of fever. There are conflicting accounts of Anne's fate. Some claim she was released and led a quiet life. Others claim she was also executed. Pirates as symbolic figures. The stories of these four show the range of piracy. Blackbeard stands for terror and intimidation. Calico Jack for the colorful image of the adventurer that we associate with pirates today. Anne Bonny and Mary Read for the power of rebellion against gender roles and conventions. Together, they embody the image of pirates that lives on in literature and film to this day. The famous pirates of the Golden Age were not heroes in the classical sense. They were robbers, outlaws, and often cruel fighters. But their stories have blurred the boundaries between reality and myth. They reflect both the horrors and the fascination of piracy. In the next chapter, we'll look beyond the Caribbean, piracy in the Indian Ocean and Asia. Other pirates were up to mischief there, from Madagascar to China, and connected the European and Asian world of piracy. Chapter 10. Pirates in the Indian Ocean and Asia, from Madagascar to China. While the Caribbean was considered the epitome of piracy in the 17th and early 18th centuries, bitter battles between pirates, traders, and great powers also raged on the other side of the world. The Indian Ocean and the coasts of Asia offered no less loot. On the contrary, the richest trade routes in the world were located here, transporting spices, precious stones, silk, and silver. Pirates found countless ways to enrich themselves on these streams. The Indian Ocean, a sea of wealth. For centuries, the Indian Ocean has connected Africa, the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. Arabian dhows, Indian merchant fleets, and Chinese junks sailed on routes that led from the Red Sea to Malacca. With the arrival of the Europeans, first the Portuguese, later the Dutch, English, and French, the Indian Ocean became the scene of a global power struggle. Portuguese carracks transported spices and gold to Lisbon. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, controlled huge trading areas in Indonesia. The British East India Company established bases in India and the Persian Gulf. These mighty merchant ships were richly laden and attracted pirates. European pirates in the East. Many pirates who started in the Caribbean later moved to the Indian Ocean. There, the treasures were even greater and the opportunities more tempting. Henry Every, the pirate of the pirates. In 1695, he captured the ship Ganji Sawai of the Indian Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, which was loaded with pilgrims and immeasurable treasures. The robbery brought him gold, silver, and precious stones worth several million pounds by today's standards. At the same time, he triggered a diplomatic crisis. Aurangzeb threatened to revoke all trade privileges of the British in India. Every disappeared without a trace. His story made him a legend. Thomas Tew. Another famous pirate of the Indian Ocean was Thomas Tew, whose attacks on Arab and Indian merchant ships made him one of the richest pirates of his time. Together with other pirates, he founded bases in Madagascar, which was at times considered the Republic of Pirates. Madagascar, refuge of the outlaws. Madagascar became a legendary haven for pirates in the late 17th century. The island was strategically located on the routes between India, Arabia, and Africa. Pirates founded small colonies there, exchanged booty for food, and lived together with local communities for a time. Some historians see Madagascar as a kind of pirate utopia where they lived independently of the European powers. Even though this pirate republic was more myth than reality, it nevertheless shaped the image of the pirate as a free spirit who created his own world. Asian piracy, China and Southeast Asia. It was not only Europeans who engaged in piracy. Asia had its own traditions of piracy. Chinese pirates. For centuries, the Chinese coast has been a playground for pirate gangs that raided merchant ships. Especially in the 18th and early 19th centuries, the power of Chinese pirate fleets grew enormously. The pirate leader Qing Shi, who commanded a fleet of over 300 ships and 20,000 pirates at the beginning of the 19th century, became famous. Southeast Asia. Pirates operated in the waters of Malacca and the Philippines, threatening local and international merchant ships alike. Malacca Sound was a bottleneck in world trade and thus a paradise for pirate attacks. Pirates and the East India Companies. The East India Companies fought with all their might against pirates who threatened their profits. They heavily upgraded their ships and accompanied them with armed convoys. Pirates who were caught were hanged without trial. But despite these measures, piracy in the Indian Ocean remained a constant problem. The companies had to learn that their profits were threatened not only by competition, but also by outlaws. Different cultures, same patterns. Whether in the Caribbean, Madagascar, or China, the patterns were similar. Pirates took advantage of political instability and economic opportunities. They attacked the richest trade routes. They created places of refuge where they lived according to their own rules. But the cultural characteristics were different. While European pirates organized themselves democratically, Asian pirates were often highly hierarchical and integrated into clans. The Indian Ocean and Asia were just as much theaters of piracy as the Caribbean. It was here that European soldiers of fortune connected with local robbers, and the world's largest trade flows became the richest sources of loot. The stories of Henry Every, Thomas Tew, and the pirates of Madagascar show how global piracy was in the 17th and 18th century. In Asia, on the other hand, the power of pirate leaders like Qing Shi make it clear that piracy was not a Western phenomenon, but a global phenomenon. In the next chapter, we will dedicate ourselves to a particularly exciting aspect: the connections between pirates and politics. Pirates were not only outlaws, they often acted on behalf of kings, governors, and merchants who secretly supported them. Chapter 11: Pirates and Politics: Alliances, Corruption, and Double Games. Pirates are often portrayed as outsiders, as outlaws who were in open conflict with all states. But the reality was much more complicated. In truth, pirates were deeply embedded in political and economic structures. Kings, governors, and merchants used it, paid for it, or turned a blind eye to their crimes, as long as it served their own interests. Piracy was not only an act of rebellion, but often a tool of power politics, and at the same time a game with double standards. Pirates as tools of the great powers. In the age of colonial expansion, the European states competed bitterly for influence. England, France, and the Netherlands used buccaneers to attack Spain's supremacy in the New World. These buccaneers were pirates with official licenses, criminals for Spain, heroes for their home countries. Names such as Francis Drake or Henry Morgan show how strongly politics and piracy were intertwined. A pirate attack could thus not only bring booty, but also weaken the opponent economically and militarily. Corruption and secret alliances. Even where piracy was officially outlawed, many politicians and governors secretly profited from it. Governors in the Caribbean accepted bribes to give pirates free access to ports. Merchants bought stolen goods, sugar, tobacco, slaves, far cheaper from pirates than from legal suppliers. Some officials even issued false pirate letters or turned a blind eye as long as some of the loot flowed into their pockets. Port Royal, Nassau, or Tortuga could only exist as pirate strongholds for so long because parts of the authorities cooperated with them. Pirates as diplomatic figures. Pirates were sometimes even deliberately involved in political games. Henry Morgan was officially convicted after his invasions of Panama, but was soon appointed lieutenant governor of Jamaica because his actions served England's interests. In North Africa, European powers at times collaborated with the Barbaresques by inciting them against their enemies and paying protection money at the same time. Even in the 18th century, there were cases where governors used pirates as an unofficial private army against competitors. Pirates were by no means just outsiders. They were often instruments of international politics. The double standards of the powers. The relationship of states to piracy was full of contradictions. The same kings who officially sentenced pirates to death unofficially let them do as long as they harmed the enemy. Pirates who became annoying or uncontrollable were suddenly considered enemies of all nations and were mercilessly persecuted. Some captains switched several times between piracy and government service, depending on what was opportune at the time. One example is William Kidd. He started as a legitimate privateer on behalf of the English crown, but was later hanged as a pirate for unauthorized robberies. Pirates and colonial societies. In the colonies, the relationship between pirates and society was even more complex. For many settlers, pirates were useful neighbors. They brought goods, money, and entertainment. Pirates spent money in taverns, bought food, and provided an economic boom. At the same time, they brought insecurity and violence so that they were feared and hated. In a way, pirates were an integral part of the colonial economy, as smugglers, buyers, and consumers. Pirates as rebels. Some historians also interpret pirates as political rebels. Their democratic structures on board stood in contrast to the authoritarian monarchies of Europe. Some pirates saw themselves as fighters against oppression and inequality, even if they were no less brutal themselves. The pirate republic of Nassau in particular is considered by some researchers to be a kind of anarchic countermodel to the colonial order. Whether this was really political conviction or just a practical necessity remains controversial. One thing is certain, pirates lived differently than the rest of the world, and that was exactly where their appeal lay. Piracy as a pretext for wars. Piracy often served as a pretext. European powers used raids on merchant ships as a justification for new wars or the establishment of bases. Spain justified its harsh policy in the Caribbean with the pirate danger. England and France justified their expansions with the fight against outlaws, while they themselves secretly supported pirates. Piracy was a welcome argument for enforcing colonial interests. Pirates and politics were more closely intertwined than the romantic image of the freedom fighter at sea suggests. They were tools, playthings, and sometimes even players in the great power game of the early modern period. Their existence was based not only on rebellion, but also on tacit tolerance and active promotion by the powerful. Without this double standard, the golden age of piracy would never have been possible. In the next chapter, we look at the decline of classical piracy, how the European great powers lost patience in the 18th century, took systematic action against pirates, and ushered in the end of an era with executions, amnesties, and naval operations. Chapter 12. The Decline of Classical Piracy. Great Powers Strike Back. The golden age of piracy spawned countless stories, but it didn't last forever. As early as the 1720s, a consistent counter-movement began. The major European powers, above all England, France, and Spain, had had enough of the constant raids on merchant ships and colonies. The pirates, who were once tolerated or even encouraged as useful helpers, were now ostracized as enemies of all nations. The hunt for the pirates began with systematic harshness, amnesties, and public deterrence, and marked the end of an era. Reasons for the decline. Several factors contributed to the sharp decline in piracy from about 1720 onwards. Changed politics. The colonial powers had consolidated their positions. Pirates were no longer useful tools, but disrupted lucrative transatlantic trade. Strong naval presence. The Royal Navy and other fleets stationed more ships in the Caribbean and the Atlantic. Economic stability. Organized convoys and new trade routes have made pirate raids more difficult. Internal problems. Pirate ports such as Nassau or Port Royal lost their importance, and offers of amnesty divided the communities. The time of the great pirate republics was over. Amnesties. Carrot for pirates. Amnesties were a clever means in the fight against piracy. In 1717, King George I of England offered a pardon to all pirates if they laid down their arms. Many pirates, tired of the constant game of hide-and-seek, accepted the offer. Some settled in the colonies, became traders or farmers. But not everyone was willing to give up. Especially notorious pirates such as Blackbeard or Charles Vane continued their raids and were finally hunted down. Harshness of the judiciary, stick and rope. Those who did not accept the amnesty could only expect death. Pirates were caught, put on trial, and usually hanged without mercy. Their bodies were often displayed in iron cages at the harbor to deter others. Public executions took place in London, Port Royal, and Charleston, attracting thousands of spectators. Famous cases such as the execution of Calico Jack Rackham or Bartholomew Roberts' crew were widely circulated in leaflets. Pirates should no longer be heroes, but deterrent examples. The hunt for the big ones. Particularly notorious pirates were systematically hunted by the Royal Navy. Blackbeard was killed in 1718 in a fierce battle against Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Charles Vane, known for his cruelty, was hanged in Jamaica in 1721. Bartholomew Roberts, the most successful pirate of his time, fell in 1722 in the Battle of Cape Lopez. His death is considered a turning point. Without his leadership, one of the largest pirate fleets collapsed. These targeted actions destroyed the structures of piracy. Rise of the Navy and forces of order. Piracy was also a catalyst for the expansion of the Royal Navy and other fleets. More patrols ensured security on the trade routes. Bases such as Kingston or Havana were militarily expanded. Cooperation between European powers led to joint operations against pirates. Where pirates once had a free hand, the presence of gunboats was now omnipresent. The end of the pirate republics. Pirate ports such as Nassau or Tortuga lost their function. Governors took control again. Merchants no longer dared to cooperate with pirates. Without safe havens, pirates were not able to survive in the long run. With this, the social basis that had supported piracy for decades disappeared. The myth survived. Although real piracy declined, legends began to grow at the same time. Leaflets, pamphlets, and books told of the deeds of the pirates, often exaggerated and embellished. In particular, A General History of the Pirates, 1724, shaped the image of Blackbeard, Rackham, and Bonny for centuries. Feared robbers became figures of popular culture. The pirates disappeared from the seas, but they continued to sail in the minds of the people. The decline of classic piracy was not a sudden blow, but a process. Amnesties, harsh justice, military strength, and the loss of bases led to the fact that piracy in the Atlantic and the Caribbean largely disappeared. What remained was the myth. The enemies of all nations soon became romanticized heroes of novels, plays, and later films. In the next chapter, we'll look at this romanticization of pirates. In the 18th and 19th centuries, how did brutal outlaws become charming adventurers in literature and culture, from Treasure Island to the first pirate operas? Chapter 13. Romanticization of pirates in the 18th and 19th centuries. When the last great pirates were executed or forced to rest in the early 18th century, real piracy in the Atlantic and Caribbean ebbed away significantly. But at the same time, a new triumphal march began, not on the seas, but in the minds and hearts of the people. Pirates, who had just been considered enemies of all nations, gradually turned into romantic figures, adventurers, rebels, and heroes full of freedom. Literature, art, and later also the theater turned cruel robbers into fascinating figures. The myth of the pirates was born, a myth that continues to this day. Leaflets and sensational publications. As early as the 18th century, pirates were the stuff of sensational reports. Newspapers and leaflets often described their deeds in lurid words. Names like Blackbeard, Calico Jack, or Bonny became known far beyond the Caribbean. These depictions fluctuated between deterrence and admiration. They were intended to instill fear, but at the same time aroused curiosity. A key moment was the publication of A General History of the Pirates in 1724, probably written by Daniel Defoe or one of his contemporaries. This work presented biographies of many pirates and thus laid the foundation for the image of the pirate as a dazzling adventurer. Pirates on stage. In the 18th century, pirates also found their way into the theater and the opera. Plays such as The Fair Maid of the West or ballad operas such as The Beggar's Opera used pirate figures to discuss social issues such as freedom, morality, and law. Pirates became symbols of rebellion against authority, in keeping with the zeitgeist of the Enlightenment. The audience loved the mixture of danger, exoticism, and romance that pirate stories promised. Treasure Island, the classic. The final breakthrough of the romantic pirate figure came in the 19th century. Robert Louis Stevenson published his novel Treasure Island in 1883. Many elements appear here that we still associate with pirates today: the skull flag, buried treasures, deserted islands, rum, and sea shanties. In particular, the figure of Long John Silver, half villain, half paternal mentor, became the archetype of the pirate in literature. Stevenson's work shaped the image of entire generations and inspired countless imitations. Pirates as children's heroes. In the 19th century, pirates were increasingly diffused for a young audience. Adventure stories for young people portrayed pirates as tricky, sometimes even noble figures. Children played Pirates and Sailors, a game that symbolized freedom and adventure. In this process, much of the brutality of real piracy disappeared. What remained was the romantic aura. Pirates in painting and art. The visual arts also took up the topic. History paintings depicted pirates in dramatic naval battles or on exotic islands. Illustrations in books and magazines made the symbols of piracy, eye patch, wooden leg, parrot, popular. These images solidified the iconography that we still know today. The myth of freedom in the 19th century. The 19th century was also the age of political upheaval, revolutions, national movements, struggles against tyranny. In this context, the figure of the pirate offered a projection surface. He embodied the independent who accepted no authority over himself. He lived outside the law, a provocation for the bourgeois order. For some, the pirate became a symbol of the fight for freedom, even if this had little to do with historical reality. Pirate romance and reality. The discrepancy between myth and reality was great. In truth, pirates were mostly brutal robbers who killed, tortured, and plundered. But in romantic literature, they became charming outlaws who experienced adventures and strove for freedom. This transformation made them heroic figures who still fascinate today. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the pirates changed from outlawed criminals to romantic heroes. Literature, theater, art, and popular culture formed the myth that covered up the harsh reality. The legend of the pirate as freedom fighter, treasure hunter, and adventurer arose and prepared the ground for modern pop culture, which glorifies pirates to this day. In the next chapter, we look into the 20th century. Pirates largely disappeared from the world's oceans, but they appeared again and again as smugglers, coastal robbers, or modern corsairs in times of war. Chapter 14. Pirates in the 20th Century. Smugglers, coastal raiders, modern corsairs. With the end of the 19th century, classic piracy seemed to have been defeated. The world's great navies patrolled the oceans. Trade routes were strictly monitored, and pirate cities, such as Nassau or Port Royal, were only memories. But piracy did not disappear. It changed. In the 20th century, it reappeared in new forms. As smuggling, as coastal robbery, and, in times of war, even as state-supported modern corsairs. Smuggling as a successor to piracy. One of the most important manifestations of maritime lawlessness in the 20th century was smuggling. During the Prohibition era in the USA, 1920 to 1933, gangs that smuggled alcohol from Canada or the Caribbean across the sea flourished. Small, fast boats delivered their goods to remote coastal areas at night, a modern version of piracy. Drug and arms smuggling also developed into a global business in the 20th century, which was closely related to piracy, organized crime at sea. Smugglers used the same tactics as pirates: stealth, speed, and circumvention of government control. So smuggling became piracy in the shadow of modernity. Coastal piracy in Asia and Africa. Even classic pirate raids did not disappear completely. Especially in regions with weak state control, they remained. Chinese coastal pirates were active until the 1930s. Gangs attacked ships in the South China Sea, kidnapped passengers, and extorted ransom. Off the coast of Africa, there have been repeated attacks on fishermen and traders, small, local forms of piracy that often remained hidden. In the Philippines and Indonesia, pirate gangs were active, attacking merchant ships with fast boats. These forms of piracy did not have the worldwide significance of earlier centuries, but they showed that piracy always persisted where poverty, weak states, and rich booty met. Corsairs in the First and Second World Wars. The great world wars of the 20th century gave rise to a new kind of piracy, state corsairs. During the First World War, the Germans used so-called auxiliary cruisers, camouflaged merchant ships that suddenly revealed cannons and attacked Allied freighters. They acted similarly to pirates, but on behalf of the state. During the Second World War, Germany again used such ships, e.g. the Atlantis or the Cormoran. They captured or sank Allied merchant ships and, at times, lived at sea for months at a time, almost like pirate fleets. Submarines were also seen as modern corsairs during this period. They attacked unarmed merchant ships, often without warning, and sank entire convoys. Thus, the idea of the state-legitimized pirate returned in the 20th century, only in a new technical form. Pirates and revolutionaries. In some regions, pirates even became political actors in the 20th century. In China, warlords and rebels used pirate gangs as allies. In Southeast Asia, piracy and guerrilla warfare were combined. Rebels financed their fights by raiding at sea. In the Mediterranean, too, there were phases during the Balkan Wars and after the First World War in which smugglers and pirates played political roles. This once again showed how thin the line between piracy, smuggling, and political struggle. Pirates in 20th century popular culture. While real piracy tended to take place in secret, its myth exploded in pop culture in the 20th century. Hollywood films such as Captain Blood, 1935 with Errol Flynn, or Pirates of the Caribbean from 2003 turned pirates into romantic heroes. Comic characters such as Captain Hook from Peter Pan shaped the image of the pirate for children. Pirate parties, costumes, and stories became part of Western entertainment culture. So, while real pirates attacked fishing boats in Asia and Africa, children in the West danced with eye patches and wooden swords, a grotesque parallelism. The transition to modernity. At the end of the 20th century, piracy was no longer a relic of the past. Rather, it turned out that it always flourished where weak states, rich booty, and the open sea met. In Southeast Asia, especially in the Strait of Malacca, raids increased again from the 1970s onwards. Structures also began to emerge off the coast of Africa that would attract worldwide attention in the 21st century. The Pirates of Somalia. Piracy had changed its face, but it remained alive. In the 20th century, piracy existed in three forms: smuggling as modern organized crime, coastal piracy in Asia and Africa, small scale but numerous, state corsairs in the world wars who repeated old patterns in a new form. The heyday of romantic pirates was over, but reality showed that piracy never disappeared, but adapted. In the next chapter, we turn to the present, modern piracy of the 21st century, from the infamous Somali pirates to the raids in Southeast Asia that still threaten merchant ships today.
Chapter 15. Modern Piracy, Somalia, Southeast Asia, and Emerging Threats. Piracy is not an episode of the past, but a phenomenon that still exists today. In the 21st century, the world experienced a surprising return of piracy. Not in the romantic guise of skull flags and treasure maps, but in the form of modern, highly organized gangs. Two regions in particular have become sadly famous: the coasts of Somalia and the Strait of Malacca in Southeast Asia. This showed that piracy always flourishes where political instability, poverty, and rewarding trade routes meet. Somalia, pirate state in the shadow of civil war. After the fall of the Somali government in 1991, the country sank into chaos. Without state authority, faced with poverty and hunger, many coastal communities turned to piracy. Initially, the raids began as self-defense. Foreign fishing trawlers plundered Somali waters, and local fishermen attacked them. But it soon developed into a billion-dollar business. Pirates hijacked international merchant ships, oil tankers, and freighters. Especially between 2008 and 2012, Somalia experienced a veritable pirate blossoming. Tactics of the Somali pirates. They used small, fast boats, skiffs, that were deployed from motherships. Armed with Kalashnikovs and rocket-propelled grenades, they boarded huge freighters, often with only a few men. Instead of stealing the cargo, they relied on ransom. Crews were kidnapped and only released for millions of dollars. This tactic was highly successful and brought individual pirate clans a fortune. The international response. The escalation of piracy off Somalia called the world powers to the scene. From 2009, international naval formations operated in the Indian Ocean, including NATO missions and the EU's Operation Atalanta. Merchant ships began to take armed security forces on board and drive in convoys. Many shipping companies relocated their routes or paid ransom to buy their crews free. By the mid-2010s, the attacks had been drastically reduced, but they have not completely disappeared to this day. Southeast Asia, the Strait of Malacca. Parallel to Somalia, the Strait of Malacca, between Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore, remained a hotspot of modern piracy. Trade routes of enormous value run through this strait every year. It is one of the busiest waterways in the world. Pirate gangs attacked tankers, freighters, and fishing boats here. Some acts were small robberies, others large-scale kidnappings. The dense shipping route made the region an ideal hunting ground for pirates. Modern piracy and organized crime. Unlike their historical role models, modern pirates are rarely romantic adventurers. They are often part of larger criminal networks. Mafia-like structures organize attacks, secure ports, and sell stolen goods. Corruption in the police and politics makes it possible for pirates to act unmolested. In some regions, such as Nigeria, the line between pirates, rebels, and political militias is blurred. Piracy is no longer an isolated case, but a global security problem. Victim of modern pirates. The victims are mostly simple sailors. Hostages were sometimes held in captivity for months, often under catastrophic conditions. Violence, abuse, and deaths were not uncommon. The psychological consequences for surviving crews were often serious. While pirates were feared in the 18th century, but also romanticized, modern pirates are clearly associated with suffering and crime. New technologies in the fight against pirates. The international community reacted with modern means. Satellite surveillance and drones help to detect pirate boats at an early stage. Ships are equipped with water cannons, sound cannons, and even electric fences. Private security companies provide armed teams to fend off attacks. Nevertheless, the causes of piracy, poverty, unstable states, lucrative trade routes remain. New threats. Even in the 21st century, piracy is not limited to Somalia or Malacca. In the Gulf of Guinea, off Nigeria and West Africa, there have been numerous kidnappings of seafarers since the 2010s. In the Caribbean and off the coast of South America, smaller robberies are also increasing again. With growing world trade and geopolitical tensions, pirates could become more important again in the future. The piracy of the 21st century is not a relic, but a real danger to the global economy. It shows that piracy always arises where there is a lack of state control and the sea lures as an open stage. Nothing remains of the romantic image of wooden legs and treasure maps. Modern pirates are heavily armed, unscrupulous criminals who take hostages and earn billions. In the next chapter, we will not devote ourselves to reality, but to the myth of pirates in literature and film, from Treasure Island to Peter Pan to Hollywood blockbusters such as Pirates of the Caribbean, which have forever shaped the image of pirates in our culture. Chapter 16. Pirates in Literature and Film, from the Treasure Island myth to Hollywood. Hardly any other topic has fired the imagination of writers, theater makers, and filmmakers as much as piracy. While the real world had long since done away with the harshness against pirates, an increasingly colorful and romantic image blossomed in art. Pirates became adventurers, rebels, sometimes even heroes, and their stories still shape how we imagine them today. Early literature, sensation, and morality. As early as the 18th century, numerous writings about pirates appeared, many of them lurid and moralizing. Leaflets and newspaper reports portrayed pirates either as deterrent monsters or as fascinating outlaws. The work, A General History of the Pirates, 1724, which portrayed Blackbeard, Bonny, and many others, was particularly groundbreaking. It provided the raw material from which later novels drew their inspiration. At the same time, authors used pirate figures to reflect on morality, law, and freedom. This laid the foundation for the literary pirate myth. Treasure Island, birth of the modern pirate image. The decisive moment came in the 19th century with Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, 1883. This is where the elements appear that still shape the image of pirates today. Treasure maps with an X, lonely islands, rum, the one-legged pirate with a parrot on his shoulder. In particular, the figure of Long John Silver, a cunning, charismatic villain, became the archetype. He was dangerous but also fascinating, an anti-hero the likes of which had hardly been known before. Stevenson's novel was so popular that it shaped generations of readers and is still considered a classic today. With Treasure Island, the foundation was laid. The pirate was no longer just a robber, but a figure between adventure, danger, and sympathy. Pirates for Kids, Peter Pan and Captain Hook. In the early 20th century, the pirate finally became a children's hero, or rather, a child-friendly villain. With Captain Hook in Peter Pan, 1904, J.M. Barrie created a villain who is frightening and funny at the same time. Hook, with his grappling hook, chased by the crocodile that swallowed his watch, became an icon of pop culture. With him, the pirate motif found its way into children's books, plays, and later cartoons. This was the beginning of the shift from cruel reality to fairy tale fantasy. Hollywood and the big screen. Cinema gave new strength to the pirate myth. In the 1920s, Douglas played Fairbanks in The Black Pirate, 1926, a milestone of adventure film. In the 1930s and 1940s, Errol Flynn embodied the charming, heroic pirate in films such as Captain Blood, 1935, or The Seahawk. Later, in the 1950s, numerous colorful adventure films were made that combined pirates with romance and exotic backdrops. Hollywood turned pirates into heroes for a mass audience, brave, freedom-loving, with waving flags and dramatic sword fights. The Return of the Pirates, Pirates of the Caribbean. After a phase of lesser popularity, pirates celebrated a grandiose comeback at the beginning of the 21st century. With Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, 2003, Disney brought pirates back into the limelight. Johnny Depp's portrayal of the eccentric Captain Jack Sparrow combined humor, cunning, and chaos, making him one of the most iconic film characters of modern times. The series became a worldwide success and brought in billions. Although the films contained fantasy elements, they tied in with the old pirate myth: adventure, freedom, the eternal struggle between law and lawlessness. Pirates in comics, games, and series. Other media also took up the topic. Comics like Asterix regularly parodied pirates. Video games like Monkey Island or Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag made pirate adventures interactive. Series such as Black Sails 2014 to 2017 combined historical fact with dramatic fiction, painting a darker, more adult picture of the pirate world. Thus, the myth of pirates lives on, not only in books and films, but also in digital culture. Why pirates remain so popular? Pirates fascinate us to this day because they embody timeless themes. Freedom. They live outside the law, do what they want. Adventure. Vast oceans, unknown islands, hidden treasures. Rebellion. Pirates defy authority, which appeals to many people. Ambivalence. They are neither pure heroes nor pure villains, but somewhere in between. This makes them ideal characters for stories that promise both suspense and reverie. From the general history of the pirates, to Stevenson's Treasure Island, to Pirates of the Caribbean, literature and pop culture have shaped the image of pirates to such an extent that it has almost completely displaced harsh reality. Brutal buccaneers became charming rebels, heroes of a fantasy that remains unbroken to this day. In the next chapter, we leave the world of pop culture and dedicate ourselves to the social and cultural aspects of pirates, their everyday lives, their rules, their democracy on board, and the myths they created themselves.
Chapter 17. Social and Cultural History of the Pirates. Democracy, Everyday Life, and Myths. Pirates were not only predators of the seas, but also creators of their own culture. On board their ships, they developed rules that differed significantly from the prevailing social orders. Their everyday life was marked by deprivation and danger, but also by an amazing form of community and co-determination. These peculiarities gave rise to the myths that surround pirates to this day. Democracy on the high seas. One of the most amazing features of many pirate crews was their democratic organization. Captain's election. Unlike in the Navy or merchant fleet, the captain was often elected. If he was incompetent or too tyrannical, he could be deposed. Advice and voting. Decisions such as goals, bounties, or penalties were often discussed and voted on among the crew. Equality. Although there were differences in rank, the distance between captain and ordinary crew was shorter than on state-owned ships. These democratic elements were attractive to many sailors. In a world where monarchs ruled and subordination was mandatory, piracy offered a touch of freedom. Loot and compensation. The distribution of the booty also followed fixed rules, which were laid down in the so-called pirate articles. The captain usually received a slightly larger share, but never disproportionately. The crew members received equal parts, which was much fairer than in the Navy, where simple sailors often came away empty-handed. The injured were compensated. Anyone who lost an arm, for example, received an additional share of the loot. These rules ensured cohesion and made life as a pirate more attractive, at least economically. Everyday life on board. Life on a pirate ship was hard and dangerous. Confinement and hygiene. The ships were overcrowded. Diseases such as scurvy or typhoid fever spread quickly. Food. Rum, cured meat, ship's rusks. There was hardly any luxury. However, raids sometimes brought exotic food and alcohol. Discipline. Despite their freedom, pirates had strict rules. Drunkenness on duty or mutiny were severely punished. Everyday life consisted of long journeys, waiting for prey, and sudden moments of maximum violence. Violence and horror. Pirates were not romantic adventurers, but often brutal fighters. Opponents were intimidated, tortured, or killed to break resistance. Prisoners could be sold as slaves or used as ransom hostages. The notorious pirate justice, such as abandonment on desert islands, marooning, was served as punishment for betrayal or disobedience. Cruelty was part of their strategy. The greater the horror, the more likely victims were to surrender without a fight. Symbols and myths. Pirates were aware of their effect and used symbols to create fear and respect. The Jolly Roger.
Skull and bone flags signaled that mercy was not to be expected. Clothing. Colorful fabrics, jewelry, and eye-catching weapons gave pirates a striking appearance. Rituals. Many crews swore common oaths, drank blood brotherhoods, or held ceremonies to symbolize unity. These stagings shaped the myth and make pirates unmistakable to this day. Women and outsiders. Pirate crews were often places for people who had no place in society. Women were rare, but not excluded. Famous examples are Bonny and Mary Read. Runaway slaves and sailors of other origins were often taken in by pirates, as they were valued as free fighters. This diversity made pirate ships a kind of multicultural community unusual for the time. Some historians even see piracy as an early form of lived inclusion. The myth of freedom. All these elements, democracy, equality, symbolism, contributed to the fact that pirates created a myth of freedom even then. They opposed kings, governors, and merchants. They lived according to their own rules, independent of national borders. They embodied an alternative model of society, albeit a violent and unstable one. This myth explains why pirates are still considered symbols of independence and rebellion. The social and cultural history of the pirates shows that they were not only robbers, but also creators of their own rules and symbols. Their everyday lives were hard, their punishments brutal, but their structures gave many sailors hope for justice and participation. The mixture of democracy, equality, and violence made pirates unique figures and legends that still have an impact today. In the next chapter, we'll focus on the economic aspects of piracy. How strongly did pirates influence world trade? What role did they play in the slave trade? And why were they both a threat and a motor of the economy?
Chapter 18. Economic aspects of piracy: trade, smuggling, and slaves. Pirates were not only adventurers and outlaws, they were also actors in economic history. Their raids, smuggling, and interference in global trade had a direct impact on colonies, trading companies, and entire states. Paradoxically, pirates threatened trade on the one hand, but on the other hand, they helped to shape it and create new structures. Piracy as a disruption of world trade. In the 16th and 17th centuries, enormous riches flowed across the oceans: gold and silver from America, spices from Asia, sugar and tobacco from the Caribbean. Spanish silver fleets were particularly rewarding. A single successful raid could make a pirate crew rich and at the same time shake Spain's financial budget. East India companies in the Netherlands and England repeatedly suffered from raids that reduced their profits. Smaller colonial traders often had to pay protection money or organize expensive convoys to sail safely. Piracy caused immense economic damage, but this was rarely documented in the long term, as many losses were concealed or exaggerated. Pirates as smugglers. Pirates acted not only as robbers, but also as merchants in the shadows. In the Caribbean, they circumvented the Spanish trade monopoly by selling sugar, tobacco, and rum on black markets. Colonists, plagued by the high prices and strict regulations of the mother countries, liked to buy from pirates. Especially in ports such as Nassau, Tortuga, or Port Royal, this smuggling trade flourished. Paradoxically, pirates thus fulfilled an economic function. They supplied colonies with goods that were officially forbidden or overpriced. The slave trade and the pirates. A dark side of economic history is the connection between piracy and the slave trade. Some pirates hijacked slave ships and sold the prisoners at markets in the Caribbean. Others freed slaves and took them into their crews, an ambivalent image. The most famous case is Henry Everett's attack on the Ganges Sawai in 1695, in which hundreds of people were abducted. Although pirates were sometimes glorified as liberators, in reality, they were often part of the cruel human trafficking themselves. Piracy as an economic outlet. For many poor seafarers, piracy was also a kind of socio-economic outlet. In the Royal Navy or on merchant ships, there were harsh working conditions, poor pay, and brutal discipline. Pirate ships, on the other hand, offered the prospect of better booty shares and a say. Many ordinary men, and some women, saw piracy as an opportunity for economic self-determination. Piracy was therefore also a response to social inequality, financial networks, and corruption. Pirates relied on networks to monetize their loot. Traders, smugglers, and corrupt officials bought stolen goods. Banks in Europe benefited indirectly from the additional flows of gold and silver that came into circulation through piracy. Governors and local politicians often received their share, whether through bribery or tacit acquiescence. Piracy was part of a gray economy that was closely intertwined with legal trade. Pirates as an economic engine. As paradoxical as it sounds, pirates also contributed to the revival of trade. Their raids forced states to develop better fleets and more efficient trade organizations. They weakened monopolies, such as the Spanish one, creating new markets for other powers. Smuggling markets and pirate ports developed into economic hubs. In this way, pirates indirectly participated in globalization. They contributed to the opening of trade, even if this happened violently. Myths and economic reality. The legend of the pirate treasure is deeply rooted in the culture: treasure maps, buried chests, and gold coins. In truth, however, pirate booty was often less spectacular. Tobacco bales, sugar, fabrics, tools, and food were the main goods. Gold and silver existed, but much rarer than in stories. Most of the time, the loot was sold immediately and converted into rum, clothing, or weapons. Pirates lived in the here and now, not for the future. The economy of the pirates was therefore short-term, consumer-oriented, and designed for quick pleasure. Pirates were more than troublemakers. They were part of the economic order of the early modern period. They disrupted trade, but they also revived it by undermining monopolies, creating smuggling markets, and challenging social inequality. Their relationship to the slave trade remains ambivalent. They were both perpetrators and occasionally liberators. In any case, however, they were closely intertwined with global economic flows. In the next and last chapter, we draw an overall conclusion. Why do pirates still fascinate today? What makes their myth immortal, and what can we learn from their history for the present?
Chapter 19. Conclusion. Why pirates still fascinate today. At the end of our long journey through the history of piracy, from antiquity to the Barbaresques, the Golden Age to modern raids off Somalia, one central question remains: why do pirates still fascinate today? Although in reality they were brutal robbers, murderers, and slave traders, they have turned into heroes, rebels, and adventurers in our collective memory. This fascination says a lot about us, about our longing for freedom, adventure, and independence. The fascination of freedom. Pirates lived beyond the law. They recognized no authority, no kings, no governors. They followed their own rules, which they negotiated democratically. For people living in strictly hierarchical societies, this seemed like a radical alternative. Even today, for many, pirates embody the idea of absolute freedom, even if this freedom was accompanied by violence. The allure of adventure. Pirates are inextricably linked to adventure. Vast oceans, unknown islands, hidden treasures, all of this appeals to our need for discovery. Even children dream of playing pirate. Eye patch, treasure map, their own ship. Pirate adventures combine danger and fun, making them perfect stories. The mixture of exoticism and risk makes pirates exciting characters for books, films, and games to this day. Rebellion and anti-heroes. Pirates are classic anti-heroes. They stand against order, against oppression, against monopolies. They are not pure heroes, but they are not ordinary villains either. Their ambivalence makes them more believable and interesting than many idealized characters. In a world that is often determined by rules and constraints, pirates embody rebellion, even if it is done in a criminal way. Symbols that remain. Pirates have created an iconic set of symbols that are still unmistakable today. The skull flag, which is immediately recognized. Eye patches, wooden legs, parrots, even if they are largely inventions of literature. Rum, treasure maps, desert islands, metaphors for adventure and excess. These icons are simple, memorable, and universal, ideal for myth-making. Pirates as a mirror of society. Pirates are also fascinating because they were a mirror of their time and our own longings. In the early modern period, they stood for resistance against colonial powers and monopolies. In the Romanticism of the 19th century, they became rebels against the narrowness of the bourgeois order. In the pop culture of the 20th and 21st centuries, they have become dazzling figures who have both humor and depth. Each epoch reshaped the pirates and made them a mirror of their own hopes and fears. Modern parallels. Modern piracy also reminds us that fascination and reality are far apart. While Hollywood turns pirates into charming heroes, real-life pirates take hostages and cause suffering. The discrepancy between myth and reality is large, but that's exactly what makes pirates so interesting. They show how we shape stories. We turn brutality into adventures, lawlessness into freedom. An immortal myth. In the end, the pirate myth remains immortal because it touches on timeless themes: longing for freedom, desire for adventure, rebellion against order, community among outsiders. Pirates are projection surfaces for desires that we all know, even if we never wanted to share their real lives. Pirates fascinate to this day because they are more than historical figures. They have become symbols of adventure, freedom, and rebellion. Their myth has detached itself from reality and lives on in stories, films, and games. But the history of piracy also shows us that freedom and violence often went hand in hand. It reminds us that myths are powerful and that we often see in them what we dream of ourselves.